Hi everyone! Welcome to PNU Talks. My name is Janinn Almeyda, an alumna of the Philippine Normal University Batch 2011 and former Associate Editor in English of the Torch Publications. I used to work as a managing editor at a publishing firm, and now I am affiliated with the Department of Education Bureau of Curriculum Development. Now, my topic is very much close to my heart, not only because I used to be a campus journalist myself, but also because we at the department offer the special program in journalism, and that is a special curricular program for grades 4 to 10. So if you have questions about how to implement the program in your school, just shoot me a message. The COVID-19 pandemic is probably one of the most important and complex stories of our time. We read or hear updates after updates, briefings after briefings, even conflicting announcements and changing terminologies, which fuel confusion among the public. So today's journalists are therefore very much challenged in working under these extraordinary circumstances. Amid this challenge, we are witnesses to the constant flow of news. So what can the campus journalists learn from all of these? If you are a journalism educator or a school paper advisor, what principle of news writing can we teach or emphasize? I will pose two questions in today's discussion. First, what can we learn or relearn from the media covering, writing, and reporting about the present crisis? Second, what other news stories can the campus press write? So what news writing principles can campus journalists learn or relearn in the present crisis? Okay, so the moment you wake up and check your mobile phone, your Facebook, how many posts are related to the coronavirus disease? Sometime in March, a social media analytics platform counted a record of almost 20 million mentions of coronavirus-related terms in just one day. It's obvious that this global pandemic is unfolding on social media with overwhelming volumes of conversations happening every second. And false claims, whether intentional or unintentional, have become so widespread that the World Health Organization calls it disinfodemic. A global civic organization even claims that millions of Facebook users are being exposed to false information, describing Facebook as the epicenter of coronavirus misinformation. Now the question is, what important principle of journalism do we need to navigate this crisis? Now this is the first point, commitment to truth. Free and independent journalism could save truth from becoming the casualty of this pandemic. Emphasis on free and independent. Now this isn't the type of journalism that sensationalizes stories or shares a non-newsworthy item just to gain internet traffic. No, that's not it. We put the spotlight on fact-checking sites and independent media such as PCIJ, Pinoy Media Center, and Verifiles. Let's take Verifiles for example. It is a non-profit online news organization in the Philippines that is affiliated with Pointer. So it's dedicated to bringing together fact-checkers worldwide. Their fact-check project is actually part of Facebook's third-party fact-checking program. As what the UN says, journalists are key to countering the dangerous outbreak of misinformation, and by renewing commitment to truth, by reporting only the truth, we have a higher chance of fighting not only the disinfodemic but also the pandemic. Now my next point is very much related to the first one. We arm ourselves with information to help us navigate our current situation, and along the way, not only do we encounter false information, we also confront ourselves with complexities, inconsistencies, and contradictions, leaving us more confused, wondering what to believe, and worse, leaving us all the more divided. So the second principle of news writing and reporting that I'd like to share is clarity. Or, increased need for clarity. Let me share this interesting quote about journalism. If someone says it's raining and the other person says it's dry, It's not your job to quote them both. Your job, guess what, is to look out the window and find out which is true. In the Philippine context, of course, we'll forget the first wave versus the second wave, mass testing versus the expanded targeted testing. Now, it is in these contexts that news should be able to not only quote personalities after personalities, but also to clarify the information to the public. And this leads us to what is called explanatory journalism. An author and professor from Poynter Institute wrote that explanatory journalism is entering a golden age in the middle of this pandemic. Explanatory journalism is a kind of reporting that helps readers make sense of complex or technical information. This type of reporting challenges the traditional notion about news that, it should follow the so-called inverted pyramid structure, where we are taught to organize details from the most important ones down to the least. Now, in this type of reporting instead, sometimes the article is best done in a Q&A format or contains subtopics, a bulleted list, and maybe with graphics, or any form that will lead to less clutter, less jargon, hence attaining clarity. Now, this article is from Interaction, which discusses the two terms that have recently created an uproar in social media: expanded targeted testing and mass testing. The lead gives us the thesis or the main idea. It reveals that the target persons to be tested under the newly introduced term expanded targeted testing is the same as the ones reported to be previously prioritized under the formerly used term mass testing. The second paragraph and the ones that follow set the context that has caused the confusion. It was during a press briefing when the presidential spokesperson introduced the term expanded targeted testing, hence debunking the commonly used term, which he actually attributed to the testing of the whole population. Now, notice that for clarity, the discussion is actually divided into subheadings. In the next subtopic, the two terms are defined, quoting the presidential spokesperson himself, enumerating the target persons to be tested, and sharing the infographic from the state-run network. The next part tells us how mass testing is defined by an organization of Filipino scientists, listing again the target persons to be tested, and sharing the infographic from the organization. Now, the last part tells us that mass testing is the term used by the World Health Organization and the Department of Health. It also helps us recall the announcement made by the DOH that in April, mass testing of vulnerable members of the population would be implemented. The article ends with a tweet from a reporter who happens to be a famous media personality, and he calls for vigilance from the public regardless of the semantics. In the increased need for clarity, it is best to emphasize journalism as a discipline of verification. What is given shouldn't be taken as gospel. What is provided shouldn't simply be reported. It's not just a matter of he says, she says, or hashtag SKL share ko lang. No, the public shouldn't be left hanging. Journalists deliver information so that the public can make informed decisions. Now, our third point is practicing scrutiny of authority. Again, what is given cannot simply be taken as gospel. Not just because of the perpetration of false information or the inconsistencies and contradictions, but simply because we are at a very volatile situation. An article from a journalism resource and advertorial website for journalists in the UK says that reporters should not shy away from holding governments accountable for the measures they are imposing. And this, friends, is what we call accountability journalism. Now, with the easing up of quarantine restrictions, if you remember, one reporter during a press briefing actually asked the presidential spokesperson if there isn't really a government-sanctioned mass testing or testing people, for example, who are going back to work after being allowed to do so. The response was that the government is still trying to increase the country's testing capacity. It still does not have plans for carrying out this preventive protocol at the scale of Wuhan, and then later on leaving this protocol to the private sector. Now, the question raised by the reporter reflects the crucial role of news reporters to not really question, but scrutinize the authority when government responses differ from one country to another. It's holding people or institutions of power accountable for what they say or not say, or for what they do or not do. Obviously, the right question was asked. It made headlines. Now that we know the importance of accuracy and clarity in journalism and the value of scrutinizing the words and actions of the key players in our current situation, my next 2 points go a bit more technical. These are the value of choosing an angle and the value of framing the story. Let's go for a lighter topic. Apple's latest mobile launch is the second generation SE, although it is yet to be available in the Philippines. You've read in the specs that it boasts its display, water resistance, its chip, which is the same with the latest iPhone model, its starting price, its battery life, etc. With all those details, which will make it news. Now in our present context, how will you make sense of the lengthy speeches, the constant press conferences, regular announcements, and updates? Now, this is the headline of a basic news story about the rising number of COVID-19 cases in the Philippines, surpassing the 15,000 mark. Notice that below the headline are multiple related stories exploring other elements, so that we, the audience, could possibly better understand the issues surrounding the story. That, for example, with such number of cases, we want to know, can herd immunity end the pandemic? Second, that although Filipinos are told to stay home to flatten the curve, most people, according to SWS survey, can't help but go out for essentials such as to get food. Third, that the jump in COVID-19 cases is attributed to the reopening of establishments. And finally, one angle exposes the need for NCR and other high-risk areas to remain under MECQ amid the plans of the government to further ease the community restrictions. Finding new angles on a breaking or developing story such as this global pandemic is an important part of the overall editorial process. One press briefing can yield multiple news stories with different angles. One news story can yield multiple angles. Now, which angle will you choose? Suppose that a super city will be built in a mountainous area. Scratching the surface is promising. It will provide more jobs, it will boost the economy and all. But there are indigenous peoples who will be displaced, who will actually be forced to leave what they consider their sacred land. Now the question, what will be the angle of your news? Let's go to framing the entire story. There is more to news writing than reporting the 5 W's and 1 H, and the order of the paragraphs that follow the lead does not necessarily follow the inverted pyramid, or the arrangement of the most important details down to the least important ones. So other than the basic facts that we put to the news, there are other elements needed to be able to write a good story. According to Michael Roberts of the Poynter Institute, to frame a story, context, impact, and human dimension are necessary. Okay, so this is a sample news about the country's first reported case of police shooting a civilian in connection to the community quarantine rules. It is published by Al Jazeera, a media company in the Middle East. So the first part of the news tells us the basic fact that a man believed to have been drunk refused to wear a face mask, got angry, threatened the village officials and the police with a scythe, and was eventually shot dead by a police officer trying to pacify him. Okay, so after giving us the basic details of the news story, the article then establishes the context of this happening. Context refers to the story's background, its relationship to things around the news. It tells readers what's normal, what's surprising, or how similar things are dealt with elsewhere. So the news here is discussed in the context of the president's warning to shoot anyone who would create trouble in connection to the lockdown rules. Now the next part recognizes the impact of this happening. Impact tells readers what the news affects or changes. It tells readers who benefits or who suffers. By recognizing the impact of this happening, we can see that it is more than just a shooting incident. The article even cites the Amnesty International, which believes that the pandemic is being used by some strongman leaders around the world to further stifle criticism and dissent when the priority should be to fulfill the government's obligation to provide health care and vital relief to all persons. The last 5 paragraphs give the story human dimension. Now, human dimension illustrates or portrays how the story affects the lives of real people by providing further details, textures, emotions, or color to convey experience. Towards the end of the news, an almost similar incident is cited. A group of residents in a slum area gathered outside their homes to demand food aid, of course with the context that poor families and workers are greatly affected by the lockdown. Now, these residents refused to go home, and although they were not shot, they were arrested. When all these 4 elements are present in a news story, then it is no longer enough to say that news is just current events, that it is just the 5 W's in 1 H. Because news is also the so what and the what now. So far, I have shared with you 5 principles of news writing or reporting relevant in the times of crisis. Commitment to truth, increased need for clarity, scrutiny of authority, the importance of choosing the angle, and the value of framing the story. And now I'm down to the last part. News now, more than ever, is public service. It is telling important stories that impact the society even at the expense of one's own life. Despite the risk of the pandemic itself, despite the media freedom threats and attacks inhibiting accountability reporting, journalists continue to commit to truth. Okay, while no journalist is perfect, we see unethical, irresponsible reporting out there. There are journalists who are driven by the public service mission to serve their communities. Journalists who empower their communities with the right tools to navigate the crisis. Journalists who are not simply fault finders, but truth seekers. After hearing all those principles, what now for the campus news writers? As a campus journalist with the many news articles circulating, what else can or should you write? Well, to respond, you need to be able to answer this question. What or who do you write for? Para saan o para kanino ka sumusulat? The journalist is never bigger than the story. Especially in these crucial times, let's think beyond prestige or honor, or competitions. Let's think beyond event-based journalism, templated news covering the school's routine. While media giants are out there delivering breaking news after breaking news on the rising number of cases, Campus Press is here to localize the story of this global pandemic, to deliver in-depth local news, to produce news relevant to its audience, to organize discussions for continued discourse. As campus news writers, you should be able to listen to your communities and give them voice. Now, some final note. The purpose of journalism is defined by the function news plays in the lives of people. So all the duties of a journalist originate from the fundamental right to information. Journalism exists because the public has the right to know. Now, this right is stipulated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and of course, the Philippine Constitution. The Philippine Constitution cites that the state adopts and implements a policy of full public disclosure of all transactions involving public interest. So journalists ask questions because the public simply has the right to know the answer. So I hope that we choose to commit to the truth and remain loyal to the public. To borrow the mantra of the Torch Publications, ink your pen, serve the people. Muli, ito po si Janinn Almeyda para sa PNU Talks, ang online series ni Inang Pamantasan kung saan ang pagkatuto ay walang hangganan.